Well, hello there, highlighters. Erin King here. And today I am super psyched to bring you the one, the only negotiation expert, best-selling author of Say Less, Get More and Clubhouse, Dynamo, and buddy of mine, Fotini Iconomopoulos. How did I do?
You got it perfect.
Did I really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. I always tell people if you can say I cannot mop all this quickly, you can say my last name.
Well, and I love how your thing is Fotini Icon because not only is it short, it also makes you sound even more glamorous and amazing than you already are. So it's a genius handle.
That was kind of a nice side effect. It was really just to make life easy for everybody.
I love it. Well, Fotini and I, we met on Clubhouse, and I know your velvet, brilliant voice, but this is our first time seeing each other face to face on the interwebs. So it's great to see your face and just be able to vibe with you for this episode. I mean, your content is phenomenal. Your book, I was telling you before we hit record, I'm like, I literally was doing a negotiation on a licensing deal, and I read your book. It went okay. It ended up sorting out, but it was a little bit of turbulence. It was a little bit of a bumpy landing. And I read your book 3 days after, and I was like, where was Votini 3 days ago? I needed all of this advice. So better late than never. But yeah, my highlighters, I think, need to know the most important thing about you, which is not your brilliant bio and your brilliant backstory, but the fact that apparently you have quite a voice. Is this true?
Yeah, once upon a time, I think all the keynote speaking and things like that have had some wear and tear, but I did audition once for the Canadian Idol when it was a thing here in Canada.
I
It's
saw that.
long been canceled. And I did make it past the first couple hurdles. So we went from like 9,000 people on day 1 at the auditions to 900, I think, on day 2.
I love it.
But I guess I didn't have that star power. I needed to find other ways
Well,
to move ahead.
respectfully, I disagree on that last part. But so tell me, if we were at a karaoke bar, what would be your go-to song?
Oh gosh, that is so hard. Um, I feel like I ask myself this question all the time. I feel
Okay.
like, the I Will Survives and stuff. I love the cheesy stuff. I do a Prince song, like anything. George Michael is are kind of my go-tos. People that people can bop and sing along to. Those are fun.
Yeah, I love that. Well, mine used to be the remix to Ignition by R. Kelly, but obviously that is
Well,
canceled.
yeah.
So yikes. But that really did get the crowd going back in the day. But now I'm like, ooh, gross. Yeah, right. So I'm struggling for my new one. I'm back and forth between Dixie Chicks, Goodbye Earl.
Oh yeah.
Which is one that really kind of gets the I like the ones where the crowd is involved, where everyone is
Yeah.
invested together. So that's the key to a good karaoke pick.
Yeah. Hey Mickey would be a good one for that.
Oh, that's a good one. Okay, good. Thank you. Well, I think the interview's over. That's all I needed to know is my perfect karaoke song. So,
My job is done.
yeah, yeah. But no, I mean, your book was so good. It's called Say Less, Get More. And I think as women, particularly, we need this book because you talk about all these opportunities for negotiation power that, particularly as women, sometimes we overlook every day, not even just financial and get the raise and get the job and get the comp package, but you talk about the everyday negotiations that we can level up in our everyday lives. So I mean, for you, what do you think is one of the biggest moments that we don't realize we're in a negotiation that we could probably perform a little better and get better results?
Yeah, for me, it's the little moments. Like I joke in my keynotes sometimes. I tell people that some of my toughest negotiations were the ones where I feel like I've been transported back in time, like it's a scene from Mad Men in the 1950s or 60s. And I'm
Mm,
negotiating for airtime. I'm negotiating for the respect of my peers and colleagues. I'm negotiating just to be heard. And those ones were really tough, especially earlier in my career. But I mean, even now, there are times where I need to make sure that I assert myself really quickly so that people will respect me immediately and not talk over me and so on. Like I step into boardrooms all the time with senior level executives, with people who look at me with side eye and going, "You're the one that's going to save me millions of dollars, really?" So I need
mm,
to get ahead of that real fast. And we communicate all the time without even saying a word. We communicate our credibility and our competence using our body language, using our tone, using all of these things. So for me, those are the ones where you are asserting your presence. You are negotiating for your space in that room. I even tell people sometimes you're negotiating for space on public transit. Have you ever tried to get on a bus and like trying to make sure people aren't crushing you and taking over your space? Those are moments of negotiation to get what you want, where you're not even opening your mouth. So
Mhm.
how can you remove the obstacles for some of the bigger negotiations later? But it's those little ones that set the tone for, a multitude of negotiations you're going to have come that are going to come after that. And so
Yeah.
if I can help women find their footing, find their foundation for some of those, heftier negotiations later, then I've set them up for success for so much more.
100%. And you have so many great strategies in your book and words, particular words you can use, and even just flipping around one or two words, the difference it can make. And we'll dive into that in a second. But how did you get into this? I read that you have been negotiating since you were like a toddler or something. So this has just been in your nature with, is it a Greek family? I'm assuming you're Greek, right?
Yeah.
So, okay,
Yeah. You can't hide
obviously.
it.
Yeah. My husband's favorite movie is My Big Fat Greek Wedding because I have a huge Irish Catholic family. So he always feels like Eon with the bundt cake, So I totally we went to Greece for the first time 2 years ago, and he was like, "I feel like Greeks and Irish are very similar. It's the food, it's the loud, it's the family." But how did you get started in negotiation?
Yeah, anytime you have a dominant ethnic culture, it's like insert here, my big fat Greek, Irish, Jewish, whatever type of scenario.
Yeah.
And when you grow up in that type of culture, you're expected to adhere to the societal norms. And so for me, I
Mm,
was negotiating against the grain because I was always like the black sheep of the family who, what do you mean she's going to go away to university? What do you mean she's going to get on a plane and do her work that way and not have a stable job and raise a family and all of those things? So I was always going against the grain. And so it was trying to negotiate my way through that. Truly, it started as a kid. So, we joke in the family that I was called the negotiator by my dad. And even to this day, every once in a while, he'll go, "No one asked to hear from you, negotiator." Like he'll pipe in every once in a while when he sees it happening. But with my career, it started because I was working in the family business. My parents and I started a business together. It was a leather and fur boutique in Niagara on the Lake where I grew up. I was working an after school job where I was selling leather coats. And my dad came to me one day and said, "You need to quit your job next month." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Because we're starting our own leather business." And we'd been in the food business, just like the movies. Like my life was that movie. We'd been in the food business all my life. And I said, "What do you know about selling leather coats?" And he said, "I know I have a smart kid." And
Wow.
so I was like, "No pressure."
Wow.
So I taught them product knowledge. We started the business together, and I really got involved in the business we went to, I remember going to Montreal and talking to manufacturers with my dad, just the two of us at a road trip. Like I was 17, I think, at the time. So all of this stuff
Wow.
happened really early. I was exposed to a lot, and I was exposed to the culture of, even going to Greece to visit family. That was normal to go to the market and negotiate these things. And later on, years later, when people said, "You negotiated your mortgage," I was like, "You didn't?" It didn't even
Wow.
occur to me that you can't do these things. So when I continued my education, I went to school and I got my MBA in organization behavior, and I was recruited by large manufacturing companies. Like L'Oreal was my first job out of school, and I was
Oh, wow.
negotiating with Walmart on a daily basis. Like they were the toughest negotiators in the business. They're a huge global company, and here I was, one of the youngest, sitting in their waiting rooms to talk to my buyers. And then, a couple jobs later, a company was hired to train us to be better negotiators. So like, "Hey, you're negotiating with Walmart. We need to train you to be better at this so you're not losing money." And at the end of that workshop, they went, "You should really be doing what we do." And I was like, "Yeah, sure, someday." I was still in my 20s. And they went,
Wow.
"No, seriously." And I was like, "Yeah, sure, someday." And so I joined this company. They poached me, and I started going all over the world, training everybody from the junior account managers to the C-suite executives. And then that evolved into them going, "It's great that you trained our team, but we have 100 million on the line. We have a billion on the line. What do we do? What do we say?" So I started to get
Wow.
invited into the boardrooms, and we would start to plot out the power dynamics and who's doing what and how to role play this. And I had so much fun doing the real life negotiations. And then when I quit my job for various reasons. The clients kept calling and going, "When are you going to come back and work with us?" And I was like, "Well, I don't work for that company anymore." They said, "We didn't hire the company. We hired Fotini." So 7 years ago, almost to the day, I started a company of my own, thinking it was just a favor to a friend because so many of my clients had become friends. And
Yeah.
and then I had to admit it became a real job.
I
And
love
then,
it.
you get tapped on the shoulder to go, hey, can you come speak at our national conference? You get tapped on your shoulder for something else. Hey, can you come and teach classes back in a program that you graduated from, the MBA program? And I was like, yeah, sure. And then HarperCollins taps on your shoulder one day and goes, we think you have a book in you. And things just kind of evolve, because when you put great stuff into the universe, stuff that's going to help people, I just feel like it comes back to serve you in some way.
Fotini, heck yes. That journey. I mean, the best entrepreneurs, the most successful authors are the accidental ones. And I
Yeah.
love that it found you, and it's obvious. It was what you were meant to do with your career. I mean, I love that story so much. I identify with pretty much every chapter of it so far. So, um I love it. I love it. I love it. So, part of your book, you have this phrase, you call it the four magic words. And these are the words I wish I had had 30 days before this licensing negotiation. But you talk about how there are four words you can use in a particular combination, a particular order,
Yeah.
and just not flipping those two, it can sound like a gift versus what did you say? A
A
gift,
punishment.
a punishment. Can you
Yeah.
share with our highlighters the magic words? Because I love this
Yeah.
so much.
It's so simple. When I say it, you're going to be like, oh, yeah, of course. It's just conditional trading. It's if you, then I. If you do this thing that I want, you have to take care of your needs first. And I'm going to say this especially for the women out there who are listening. Be a little selfish for a moment. Take care of your needs with that if you. Then I will do this thing that you want. Then I'm going to provide you with a gift. The order here, if it changes, if it goes, yeah, I'll do that thing for you, but only if you do this thing for me, now it sounds like a punishment or a threat.
Yep.
But reverse the order, and now it sounds collaborative all of a sudden. So especially for women who are often perceived as too aggressive or greedy, or dare I say bitchy in negotiations, and there is lots of data to prove that. This is particularly important so that we can change the perception of being collaborative versus being aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not greedy to say, hey, here are my needs, and I'll give you something you need too. But it's that perception management of those, the order of those words, that is super important in this case.
It's so genius and so simple, but so effective. And if no one takes anything else from this episode, but walking away today and using the magic phrase to see how it might change an interaction with someone, then we have done our work here today. That is just brilliant, brilliant,
Absolutely.
brilliant. So, okay, let's talk about the non controllable. Let's talk about the fact that if our name is Jane and not John, and we are a strategic, I know you're like slow blinking, by the way. You guys can't see her, but she's slow blinking. But I've had this happen a million times. I mean, when I raised 7 figures for PMS.com, a tampon delivery service from a table full of Newport Beach alpha bro dudes. Trust me, I have been in my fair share of venture capitalist, all male
Mhm.
boardrooms. And I don't have an answer to this question myself. I know what definitely doesn't work, but have you found that there is a tactic, a phrase, a trick, maybe even just like a mental cap that you put on to kind of give them the middle finger in a way that empowers you and authorizes you to show up as Fotini in her full power? Because that is such a real thing that what works for dudes doesn't always work the same for us. So how do you cope with that? And what advice do you have for those of us who still are scratching our heads on some of the non-controllables in those scenarios?
Yeah, there's a couple things that come to mind. I would say the analogy I use is it's almost like a balance beam. If you think of those Olympians, when they're on this balance beam, that's the one that women have to walk on. The one
Yeah.
that men have to walk on is like a meter wide, and they have plenty of room to stumble, and we'll forgive them for it. When we stumble on this much skinnier balance beam, we'll be called that bitchy, that aggressive, that all of those awful connotations that come along. And one of the things that I mean, the reason I titled the book Say Less, Get More is because you can do so much without even opening your mouth. And I talk a lot about having what I call a mental pause button. And so when those moments of doubt creep in, when that imposter syndrome creeps in, when that, oh God, what do I say, deer in the headlights moment comes up, it's about taking a calming breath and going, I've got this. And it sounds so unbelievably cheesy, I know, but having a positive mantra, being able to tell yourself, I'm excited. about what I have to share here. I know I have a lot to contribute to this room. There was a Harvard study done in 2013 that I talk about all the time where
Good.
anxious negotiators were told to say I'm excited instead of anxious, and they actually got much better results. So you can actually change your brain, you can change the way you function in a room just by changing your mindset and going, I deserve to be here, I am great at what I do, I know what I'm doing here. It starts with you, because then what's going to happen is you will physically show up differently. And
Mhm.
so, Dr. Amy Cuddy talks a lot about power poses and how you can change your brain too. So when you take up more physical space, and I started to notice this after I read Amy's book and after I heard her TED talk, I started to notice how I sit in chairs. I'm not slumped over a computer. I'm not head hanging down. I don't look up from underneath my eyebrows. I am making sure I'm eye level. I'm making sure my chair is at everybody else's level. Sometimes I
Yeah.
drape myself over the back and I take up more physical space, right? We're both doing it. So, I mean, those little things go a really long way. So, a power pose can help you psych yourself up. One of the other things that I love to tell this story to people because when I was hired by this training company, I went through their workshop and obviously I performed really well, which is, what one of the reasons why they invited me to come on board. But years later, my then boss said to me, he goes, I knew I wanted to hire you. I knew I wanted to get to know you from the second you entered the room. And I was like, well, this could get really awkward, but tell me more about this. And he said, you walked in wearing this red dress like you owned the joint, and you just stood out in a sea of guys in black golf shirts. And he goes, the way you walked in, he went, that's somebody I need to get to know. And so you might notice I wear a lot of red. I'm very bold in my personality. We chose red for the cover of the book because it is a bold statement to be able to go, I don't even need to talk so much. I'm going to get
Wow.
what I need out of this. So I make sure I'm not a wallflower. And, it physically pains me when I see women and when women tell me stories where they go, I ask a question. When you walk into a room and you see a boardroom with chairs all around it, a boardroom table, and then you see the rest of the room because there's not enough room for everybody at the table, where the perimeter is surrounded by chairs too, up against the wall. Which one do you choose? Too many women don't choose the seat at the freaking table. This is not figurative. This is literally, they don't choose the seat at the table. And I've heard other senior level women talk about this as well. And one of the women in my audiences will inevitably say, well, what if you're not the most senior person there? What if someone else deserves that seat more? And I'll go, were you invited? Were
Mhm.
you put on that invitation by mistake?
Yeah.
Are you not supposed to be in that room? Because the other thing is, when you are invited to that room, you have the ability to be there. If for some reason, let's say the CEO walks in late and it's obvious they need a seat at that table, they're not going to sit in the back of the room. Because you put yourself there, because you showed up early, because you took up that physical space, you now have the power to go, you know what? I showed up early. I'll give you my space this time and someone else can give it up next time. You are now creating this reciprocity. You're also bringing attention to yourself in a confident way to say, yeah, I showed up early, but for the better of the team, you should have a seat here as well. Next time somebody else will do this, so that you're not always the sacrificial lamb in this analogy either. So you always have to make sure that you are asserting yourself, that people recognize that you are there, people recognize that you deserve to be there, and the rest will start to follow. Because that's I think one of the reasons why I get the least amount of resistance that I do. I've always gotten resistance, but it could be a hell of a lot worse. And
Yeah.
I've always had women pull me aside and go, how did you do it? How did you get them to listen
Mhm.
to you? How did you get them to put their phones down? And for a long
Mhm.
time I didn't know. And when I started reading more about body language and confidence and all of those things, I started to dissect what I did. And these are the little things that go a really long way.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, Cialdini reciprocity, right? The basis of
Mhm.
persuasion theory, 101. And but I think to your point, sometimes it's not this big, loud, aggressive, perfectly rehearsed, presentation that gets it done. It is these smaller, nonverbal, but also mindset shifts. Because you're describing taking up space, sitting at the table, but really at the core of that is a firm belief that you deserve it and that
Absolutely.
you've earned it and that you will not disappoint. And I have a book called You're Kind of a Big Deal, which is
Yeah.
about believing in your big deal energy, believing,
Yeah.
and that's at the core of it, right? Because the rest of these things are just ancillary results of really believing in your heart that you have as much to contribute at that table as the most senior person and maybe more. And I think that it's so obvious that you have that in spades. And so if people listening are not feeling as Fotini strong as they could, it's asking yourself, like, why do you not, what narrative are you telling yourself
Yeah.
that is maybe a BS fable, that is not a true story, that you can rewrite to be able to show up and have the audacity to sit at the table and be heard.
Yeah, I think that is so important, and I'm so glad you highlight that. And I think people need to listen to your book and go, "You are a big deal." If you don't feel like you're a big deal, find a reason to be a big deal. Even when and I think about my most junior days when I sat in that L'Oreal office and I was getting invited into large meetings because I was the analyst or whatever it was in that moment. If I didn't feel I needed to be there, I created a purpose for me being there. So I would take minutes. And then I would find an excuse to be in someone's email inbox afterwards. Like, here's some of the key points that I took down. I thought these would be useful to you. And I wasn't deemed a secretary by taking those minutes. It was my key insights that I was providing. Right. So then they went, oh, this is a useful person to have. Well, maybe we want to have her in the next one as well. And you start to get noticed and you're bringing value. If you're constantly bringing value, they're going to recognize that you're also going to start to see it as well. My hope is that you see it first. But
Right.
if not, then create some reason for you to have value. The other thing I always tell people too is when it comes to salary negotiations, because I get questions about that stuff a lot,
Yep.
you have to do your research, right? You have to know what is your worth out there in the market. What are people like you with your experiences, with your qualifications, with your credentials, and so on? What are they making out there? And then I tell people what you're seeing in terms of those numbers is the averages, because there's going to be someone who's higher than that number and there's going to be someone who's lower than that number. Where do you fall in there? If you
Mhm.
are up for a job, if you are up for a promotion, it's probably not because you're average. So I tell people, add the not average tax
I
and
love
make
it.
sure that you are adding that extra level. And that's going to pump you up to make sure that you know what you're bringing to the table. If you don't know that going into a salary negotiation, it's going to be so hard to get what you want. And that goes for every single situation that you're going into. Know
Yep.
your worth. You're a big deal.
Add more, get more. In that case, I love that so much. So, okay, this is the part of your book where I felt really attacked in the best possible way that you can possibly
Uh-oh.
feel attacked. You brought up a point that I literally, I mean, I stopped and just it changed my life. You talk about the fact that as women in particular, we talk ourselves out of a deal. We talk ourselves out of a deal. And as speakers and authors and thought leaders and salespeople, I mean, we are literally paid to be speakers. And so for me in particular, it is very hard for me to understand how when to shut up basically. I mean, like, how do we know if we are doing that? Where are places we should be extra intentional about not doing? I mean, I literally had a conversation yesterday with a really important client and I was really invested and I got on the call. They were already obsessed with me from Google and whoever they thought I was, and I wanted these people to like me so badly that I think I may have talked myself. I think I may have taken a positive perception and I may have slightly, I mean, I think they're still going to hire me, but I was so excited and nervous. And I was just like, nah, I'm like, why was I talking so much? And in your book, you talk about the fact that it's the caveman thing of the saber-toothed tiger. And so we would, kind of quiet our mind in order to be able to physically respond and all these different reasons why we do it. But how can we stop doing it?
Yeah, and this is why that mindset is so unbelievably important,
Yeah.
because yeah, you do get into this cave person mode where you're faced with a threat of some kind, a threat to your ego, a threat to your security and so on, and then you start talking and talking and talking and you talk yourself out of a good thing. And so one of the coping mechanisms for that is obviously to just find, your own personal mantra, your meditation and so on. Find your way to take that meditative breath. But one of the tools that we use for people who are not good at that is to ask great questions. So even like when someone calls me about a speaking engagement or about training their teams or so on, one of the first questions I ask is, I'm thrilled you're here. How did you find out about me? And then they get to talk about all the wonderful reasons why they want to work with me, right? The same way that your Google folks or the people who Googled you did the same thing.
Yeah.
So that now it's coming out of their mouths. So they're the ones showing how eager and desperate they are for you instead of you showing how eager and desperate you are. So then it's how can you use questions then to move things forward, to facilitate the conversation a little bit more? You want to talk about yourself in the best way. You want to position yourself for success. And then when it's time for you to put your proposal on the table, whether it's setting your price, whether it's talking about what you need from them, whatever that might be in the moment, If you've done all the really great things about setting yourself up and putting yourself on that pedestal for them, once you put your proposal on the table, that is the time to shut up.
Yeah.
You've done it. If you're tempted, when they go, oh, that's a lot more than I was expecting, you're going to be very tempted to go, but here's all the reasons why I'm so expensive.
That's exactly what I did.
That is the temptation. That's the deer in the headlights moment. That is the cave person moment. You already told them that stuff. Unless there's something new, and even at that point, there's a careful way to handle that. They already know that. And now it's time to put it back on them. Well, remind me, what is it that you're trying to get out of this? How much did you expect that to cost? Who else have you talked to? Those are other questions where they go, well, actually, yeah, that is a really big laundry list of stuff we wanted to do. And yeah, the other person we talked to doesn't have the same credentials that you did, the ones that I was just raving about 5 minutes ago.
Yeah.
So you can use questions to shut yourself up and get them to hand you the information you need. I think we can all agree information is power.
Yeah.
The best way to get that information is to shut up and let them give it to you. If you don't give them that airtime, they're not going to be able to give you that golden information to help you move forward. The other question you can ask, of course, is how close can you get to that? What are some of the obstacles we can work through that might be holding us back from some of those things? So again, ask the question and go into problem solving mode instead of having to sell yourself again. You sold yourself once. That's how you got into the position where they wanted to hear a proposal from you. So it's about not selling. It's about saying less and getting more oriented around those questions to find a solution.
It's so brilliant, Fotini. And everything you're talking about, you have this beautiful spectrum in your book. And it's sort of all like sort of low stakes tourist vacation level negotiations, all the way up to more high stakes, build trust, long-term negotiations. And you talk about sort of everything in between. I love how you sort of lay that out there. It's like a spectrum of light, how you describe all these different scenarios. And I guess the biggest question that I have, and this is a selfish question, is sort of my superpower on stage, off stage, everything I do, I don't have a filter. I am very authentic. Exactly who I am, backstage, on stage, online. I am to my mother. I am the exact same person. Well, I'm a little bit worse to her, but all these scenarios, I'm pretty much the same person. So my authenticity is what I really lean into as my unique value proposition. How do we, if someone's listening and that's very much similar to who they are, and they are not inherently good at thinking strategically, putting on the filter, engineering a certain persona, or developing a certain optics for different scenarios, how can we become better at existing at that intersection of authenticity and humanity and empathy and who we really are, but also being a little smarter and more strategic with how we show up in some of these high stakes scenarios?
I love that you brought up the subject of authenticity because I think it's incredibly important. And one of the things that I tell people all the time when I'm doing intensive workshops with them is I'm not trying to change you. I'm not trying to change who you are and who you show up as. If anything, I want you to improve that person and show up as the most of yourself as opposed to holding some of yourself back. Not everybody deserves to get everything from you, though. And so it's not about a filter so much as, which of these cards do I want to put on the table right now? I have a whole bunch of different things in my wardrobe, for example. I have power suits and I have yoga pants and I have everything in between. All of those things are part of me and my personality and my authenticity. And I'm going to choose which one of these outfits is appropriate for the day. And so the power suit is no less authentic than the yoga pants. It's just about choosing which one of these things do I now want to bring with me. And what I'm doing is trying to increase your ability to choose those things in that moment. And so bring your authentic self, choose which wardrobe you want to dress it up in today. One of the say less, get more opportunities for you is to go, you can be that kind, bubbly person with the person on the beach in Mexico buying a souvenir. And you can be that same person when you're in a boardroom with those CEOs. How much you share with that person on the beach in Mexico might be a little bit less. You might do that bubbly thing and go, hey, I'm having a really great day. It would be even better if you can give me a good deal on this, thing that we have in front of us. You don't need to say, I want to give it to my niece and she's going to play with it this much. And it's the only one I've seen on the beach that has this particular feature on it. That's where I say less.
Right.
But it's not about changing who you are. And that's one of the things that, you're now familiar with Cialdini. And I love that about one of the persuasions of principles that he talks about is likability.
Mhm.
And so most people assume they assume that you go into a negotiation and it's like those, Wall Street, slick, power suit, fast talking,
Mhm.
banging fists on the table, my way or the highway things. Those aren't the people who get the best negotiations. In fact, Cialdini talks specifically about one of the studies that they did where they took MBA students and he put them into two separate groups. And they told the first group, get down to negotiating right away. And they told the second group, spend a few minutes getting to know each other first. And the first group that went down to business right away, right? Strip everything back. 55% of them closed the deal. And that's not too bad. The second group, though, who spent just a few minutes getting to know each other, 90% of them closed the deal. And
Wow.
not only did they close more deals, they closed deals that were 12% greater in value. So they closed better deals,
Wow.
all because they spent a few minutes getting to know each other. And that is part of the authenticity of so many cooperative people out there. So
Yeah.
you can still be yourself. You can still be that likable person if that's who you are. You can still be that, introverted person if that's who you are too. I just want you to decide which of these outfits in my wardrobe, in my repertoire, am I going to put on today? Which is going to serve me best and help me feel like my best self? Because there's some days I need to put on the red lipstick. And there's some days where I was like, I don't want to go and wear any makeup whatsoever. But both of those are part of my personality. So I now get to choose, and I don't have to be somebody I'm not. If I was not a red lipstick wearer, I would not be wearing this today. Those are the types of things that I want people thinking about. Just bring your
Yeah.
best self. It's not about changing who you are.
Well, it's so good because even if you do try to bring this perfectly persuasive, polished, rehearsed version of you, people are going to smell that a mile away anyway. So
Yeah.
even if it is perfectly rehearsed and technically effective, there'll be some mistrustworthy vibe that they're going to pick up on that'll kill all your preparation anyway. So we might as well pick the best outfit for you, show up with a little bit of the strategies and the keeping things in mind, how much information you want to reveal, your end goal, your end game, what your level is of what you're willing to lose or not lose, but then ultimately being who you are. And I love how you're marrying those two because I think traditionally, whether you're studying, my book's digital persuasion, so persuasion or negotiation, traditionally there is a very, maybe it's a masculine patriarchy infused version of it. And I
Yeah.
love that you're sort of weaving in that humanity, that authenticity, that empathy that's a little more realistic, I think, especially in
Yeah.
2021.
And it's interesting that you mentioned, trying to show up as somebody else, because too often in business, we're given the advice to mirror the other party.
Yes.
And there's some truth to that. However, I think it's been taken too far, because what can happen is that can feel contrived and it can
Mhm.
lead to distrust. So I encourage people to be the mirror. If you lead, if you are, congenial, if you are smiling at somebody, they're going to smile back. It's that reciprocity thing. So you can be the mirror that you want them to reflect, rather than feeling like you need to become their persona. You can own the room. You can walk in there like you own the joint, and you can decide, this is going to be a collaborative negotiation today. I'm going to be a collaborative person, and they're going to start to reflect that, because that's typically how human nature happens. You can choose to be their reflection, or you can make them become a reflection of you and your values and how you want this moment to operate.
So good, Fotini. I love it. I love it. I love it. Okay, so I'm just picturing you in full, just red power suit, red lips. I'm picturing a bunch of guys with their arms crossed. The stakes are high. I'm just picturing you just dominating it. Do you have a story from all of your experiences where there was a time where you won a negotiation or accomplished an outcome that you had in mind, where even you were like, damn, that was pretty good? Like one that you're really proud of, where you felt either like you learned a great lesson or you accomplished something that even you walked away and you were like, I nailed that. And then what was the secret weapon? Like, how did you do it?
So there's a few that come to mind where I've even surprised myself, but and this might be a tricky one to get into, because it actually isn't one where I got the outcome I expected. So I went into a negotiation with I've had a lot of employers over the years, so I won't specify which one, but I went into a negotiation with an employer, and I found out that I was being discriminated against at work. I found out that there was a
Mm,
pay discrepancy. And of
mm.
course, I can't just sit back and not do something about that. And it's not the only time in my life where I've found a pay discrepancy, because people like to confide in me. And so I find out a lot of information about payroll and things like that. So I felt like I needed to do something about it. And I raised the situation, and I did all of the things that I've read in all of the books. I mean, I've been interested in this subject for a really long time. So I didn't just start reading negotiation when I became a negotiation consultant. Um, So I did all the things by the book, and I raised it in a collaborative way, and I said, "Hey, there's been something on my mind and I feel like I need to discuss it with you, and here's a situation at hand." And the person that I was dealing with, my manager, was like, "Oh, I can't believe you." It was all of the stereotypical stuff that comes up. Everything I read in every study, it was, treating me differently because I'm a woman, thinking I'm greedy, thinking I'm bitchy, all of those things that just came out in spades. And I was like, "Whoa, this is studies come to life." And
Yeah.
he started going, "I stuck my neck out for you." Well, first he told me that it was inappropriate that I was raising it. I said, "Why would it be inappropriate to be raising it?" He didn't have an answer for that. Then he said, "Well, that's something that we can, that's a fireable offense here." I said, "Actually, that's illegal for you to tell me that. So you might want to get more familiar with the law before you cite such things." And like, I was just so well prepared. Like, I knew all my stuff inside and out. He's like, "Well, we discourage that here." I said, "Well, then you may want to tell that to the people who confided their salaries in me, because I haven't shared mine with anybody else." And I was just so
Ooh.
ready for every single thing he
Yes.
said. And, I was ready to launch into my Mediterranean blood was, boiling. I was ready to start throwing the hands up and down the way I've seen my father do for a million years. And when he said, "I stuck my neck out for you," I knew he was lying, because I also had inside information that there was more budget and he was in charge of it and blah, blah, blah. And instead of launching into yelling at him, and this was done virtually years ago. I've worked in virtual environments for a very long time, because I've been traveling for so long. And I went, "Thank you." I just had this moment of pause. This is where came up with what I call the mental pause button that I talk about in the book so much. This was where it was born. It's like I had this out of body experience when I went, "You are not going to give him the opportunity to call you emotional," because he'd called me that before. "You are
Mm,
not going to give him the opportunity to use this against you in any way. You are not going to give him the ammunition to make you seem irrational or any of those things." And I just stopped myself. And when he said, "I stuck my neck out for you," I went, "Thank you." And he went, What?" Like, you could see he was having a deer in the headlights moment. And I said, "Well, if you are saying you stuck your neck out for me," now I'm using Cialdini's principles and using his own
mhm.
words and all of that kind of stuff, "then I'm supposed to trust you because you are my manager, and we work together so closely, and we're both here for the well-being of the company. Then I should be believing that. So if that's the case, then thank you." He went, "Oh, okay." And then he calmed down. And then I said, "I'll take it from here." And then he started to go white again. And he went, "I don't think you should raise this with HR or with our, CEO or whatever." And I said, "Well, you said that since, you've stuck your neck out for me and you've done everything that you can. Well, if that's the case, then, and I can't sleep at night knowing I haven't done everything I possibly could, then I'll take it from here." And he was just kind of stumbling over his words. And I loved every second of it. I felt so vindicated at the end of that. So that was my moment where, I took it a step further. I had a very similar conversation with the person who's the CEO of the company, and and it ended up quite similarly, where I was like, "Okay, I'm going to do everything in my power to not let my Mediterranean blood take over." And at some point, he started being the one who was like hands going everywhere, and he went, I can't believe you're raising this." And I said, "Look, I came here to speak to you adult to adult. And I'm very tempted." I said, "I'm doing my best." I even cited it. "I'm doing my best to make sure that my Mediterranean upbringing is not influencing our decisions right now. And I'm trying my best to stay calm and not, raise anybody's blood pressure. If you can't do that, then maybe we shouldn't continue this conversation today." And he said, "Yeah, maybe we shouldn't." And that was the pause living out in real life. We stopped the negotiation and we walked away from it. I never got the salary increase that I wanted. What I did get, however, is validation that this is no longer the place that shares my values. And I had been doubting my place there for quite some time. And it was all the confirmation I needed to walk away without any doubts in my mind, without any what if scenarios. I'd done
Yeah.
everything I could do. I did it by the book. I felt so good about how I handled myself with zero regrets. And when I walked away, all sorts of opportunities opened up for me because of the way that I handled myself, because I lived by my values, my ethics, and so on. And they didn't. And so if they weren't willing to live by those values, then we were no longer a match for each other. And so it's so strange when you can feel so good about walking away from a negotiation where you didn't get what you wanted, but you got something even better.
Yeah.
And so it is really about living your authenticity, your truth, following the say less, get more mantra, and it's never let me down. And in that moment, I needed it so desperately. It could have gone sideways in so many ways. And I don't know if I would be here today if it had gone sideways.
Fotini, bravo. That is such a story. And I also just I love the fact that technically, so you're a negotiation expert, and so your objective is to win the negotiation. But what I love is that you walked away from that experience and you redefined what a win looked like.
Yeah.
You took what someone might have thought was like a quote unquote failure or a loss or poor me or the bias or victim mode or all the roads one could take from that outcome, and you found the gem, you found the truth, which was confirmation it wasn't for you. And isn't it interesting that every time we are brave enough to really embrace what's not working and what's not a fit and what's not good for us, it gets us that much closer to finding out what we actually do need at the end of the day. So I love that you trusted that process. And like you said, you might still be there today if it had gone differently, and you wouldn't be writing best-selling books and gracing some of the world's biggest keynote stages. So I guess we have those guys to thank after all.
I have a little, the very last line of my book is my favorite line of the book. And I think it's something to the effect of, it's in the acknowledgments. So the very last acknowledgement is thank you to the assholes who treated me the way they did, because I would not be here today without those experiences to get me to the other side.
It's
But the truth
so
of the matter is,
good.
I knew my objective going in there. My objective was to be validated and rewarded appropriately, and to be treated like somebody who deserved that. And what I uncovered was that just wasn't possible in that space. And so I found another space that did serve that. And, I'm so much better for it today.
It's so good, Fotini. Well, I'm thrilled. I'm grateful to those assholes as well, and I'm sure all my highlighters are grateful as well. Your book's incredible. Strategies. You have your coaching. Your course is launching, I think you said,
Very
coming
soon.
up.
Yeah.
Very exciting. So we will put links to all the things. Before we let you go, are you reading anything good right now that just has your attention? Like you're just a page turning away for a nonfiction book?
I am. I'm in the middle of reading a book from a couple women again here in Canada, where I'm based in Toronto, and it's called Power for All. I want to find the names of these women who have authored it. Um, it is, oh, wrong book. I've got so
Power
many on
for
the
all.
go. Yeah,
Yeah.
Julie Batilana, I believe, is the name of the author.
Okay.
I discovered her through the University of Toronto, and it's basically, I have a whole section in my book on power, and this is validating basically everything that I wrote. So phew, relief for me, but also a deeper dive into some of the principles that I talk about. And I think it's really fascinating. I think it's a fantastic read, especially for women, because power shows up in ways where you don't realize it. And there are ways that you can mobilize a little bit more. And even when you have a lot of it, you don't necessarily need to exert all of it, because that can become dangerous. So some of the things that I touch on in my book, she just does a really great deeper dive into it. So I'm really enjoying that.
Thank you for that. We will definitely include the link to that, and I will be ordering it on Amazon here in the next 5 minutes. It sounds great. Oh, Fadini, well, thank you for sharing all your brilliance, your storytelling, your experiences, and my highlighters are just going to love your book. So we appreciate you spending time with us today. Where should we go for more Fatini? Like, where do you spend time on this? Are you Instagram gal? You're a Clubhouse gal, right?
I haven't touched Clubhouse in a really long time. I
I
need to
haven't
get back
either.
in it.
I haven't either. I know. Ever since the vaccines came out, I'm like, I want to talk to people in real life.
Yeah, I left on vacation. I went to Greece in the summer, and then I haven't opened it since then. So once I started seeing live people out and about, it was
Right.
hard to justify getting back on. But I am on the socials. Instagram is my favorite of the moment, because I can give advice to people. So I take questions and I give advice all the time, and I save them in my stories. So I'm at Fotini Icon there. LinkedIn is another huge one where I'm sharing articles and things of that nature as well. And the book is a great place to get a lot of my stuff. So yeah, find me on all the socials, and you keep asking me questions, and invite me to your book clubs, and I'm happy to have these conversations, because it's so important to make sure that we empower as many people as we possibly can. And thank you so much for your enthusiasm. I mean, it's just been a joy talking to you, and I love that you can identify so many things in the book that you can apply to real life as well.
Well, thank you so much. And Fatina, you are definitely an icon. So thank you for being here today. We appreciate you.
Thank you so much.